Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVMLP, Asheville 103.7, and streaming online, WPVMFM.org. The voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song. WalterParks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville, and Robin Collier for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio in Taos, New Mexico. You can always reach me, Navé, at jamesnavé.com. Navé is spelled N-A-V-E. And if you would like to send me a story, I would love to hear it. And I'd like to remind you that we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, imaginativestorm.com is a great place to go. We have free workshops on Saturday and Thursday, and we have a Zoom link at imaginativestorm.com, so you can get to know us by doing a free workshop on Saturdays and on Thursdays. So today I have a new friend, Nova Wallace. She's a writer. She's an artist. She works in public relations, and she's also on our Imaginative Storm calls, and she works with some of the Imaginative Storm concepts. So I often will invite people from our group to come on and talk to me a bit about what they're up to. So Nova Wallace, welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio.
Hello, Navé. How are you? And thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're a writer. You work in the business of communication and in the business of language. So I would like for you to just start by telling us what you would like for us to know about you. What's important for you? 2025, the beginning of a new year. What's up?
2025, the beginning of a new year for me is about growth. So what I'm focused on in my life right now is just developing myself as a better leader, growing as a person. I got my start in news. So I worked 10 years in the news business. I was satisfied as a journalist. I worked the community news. So I would go out into the public and I would interview business owners, political figures, people like that. And I would write up features on them for the publication. And I did that for 10 years and I was really happy, but I am an author. I write under the pen name Nova Wallace. And my Nova Wallace business, I felt was very stagnant. I was not progressing. And so when I looked at it, I said, I need to more focus my career to help my side business. Long story short, I found out about press release writing, found my job at Boundless Media, which was exactly what I was looking for. And since then, everything has just grown and exploded in my life for me. So I would tell people what I've learned the most about my whole experience is everybody is going to work at some point in their life. Do what you love. Do what you love. And then it doesn't feel like work. It's fun and challenging. And if you can find something to do that enhances your hobbies, there you go.
That's an interesting notion. Do what you love. I've heard that quite a bit, which of course is one shade away from talking about leadership. Do what you love requires one to discover things inside that may not grow right away. And as a leader, how do you lead someone to, first of all, discover what they love and then make it work for them as a lifestyle? I can tell you're on your vibe. I can tell by the tone in your voice. Somebody else listening to this might be thinking, well, I'm not quite on my vibe. So how does somebody get into something like this? And how do they take the love and make it into a life that fulfills them?
When I was 18, I hired in the factory. I worked at Lear. And then at 19, I worked at General Motors. And at 19 years old, I was a 30 and out person. I never saw myself leaving GM. I got hurt and had to make some difficult choices. How I did that? I did what I wanted to do without caring what other people thought or told me to do. Everybody discouraged me from being a writer. The whole starving artist thing is real. I will tell anyone to be a writer, you have to first lead yourself. You have to find what you want to do and then be the example for others. So after college, I had no experience, only an education. And so what I did to get that experience is I volunteered and I did internships. Majority of my time at the newspaper, I was a volunteer and an intern. In the end, I was paid. But in the beginning, I was not. And I found a way to make a little bit of extra time in my life to do those stories because I saw the bigger picture that one day I would make the money I wanted to make.
How does patience play into this?
Everything. You're going to give up if you're not patient. If you're looking for a quick fix, easy solution right away, art takes time to grow. It takes time for people to trust you, to trust your art, to want to support. It's so easy to just give up. This past year, 2024, I won 4 awards for my book. One of my books I published in 2016 and won an award for it this year. So you have to be able to wait it out. I love writing because it's not something you age out of, like other forms of art where you have to do it young, you have to do it right away, and you have this short window in your life of if it's gonna work or not. The average writer starts at 50, to be honest. So if you're in the game in your 20s and you're way ahead of people. So that always was an advantage for me that I'm not aging out, I'm aging in. I can remember, Navé, when I first wrote my first book. It's a memoir called Finally Unrestricted. And what I did to promote it was I would rent kiosk at the mall. And I had signs and everything, and I set up everything at the mall, and I would direct market sell to people. So I would just sit out there and talk to people. Number one feedback, you're too young. Number one feedback, you're just too young. And people would just say that over and over. And I can remember one gentleman, I tried to sell him my book and he stopped and he grabbed my book and he held it up and he looked at me and he said, "You don't know what you have here. You just don't know." He said, "You're too young. You shouldn't ask for this." And it was weird. I was angry. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, I want millions now. Now, years later, that was in 2011. I think that if I would have gotten all this success very young, I would not have known what to do with it. You know, I'm a very spiritual person. Maybe not so much religiously, but I am spiritually. I just believe that the God that I believe in and serve has a plan for all of this for me that is going to work out in time. Do I feel successful? Yes. Do I want more success? Yes, I want to make my money back. To get into this business, you're going to spend a lot of money if you want a quality product. That is what my biggest advice I will give to anybody. I write African American literature. My whole concept and approach, make a book that can compete with any book ever written. And then one day, maybe people will notice me, but I don't strive to write a hit. I strive to write a classic. 100 years from now, people will still read that book. They'll still want that painting in their house. That is a classic.
How do you manage to do that without becoming overwhelmed, becoming blocked because I'm comparing myself to the greats? How does that work for you? Obviously, it seems to fuel you whereas it stumbles for others.
What makes the great a great? We study this in college. I think what makes the great a great is the level of honesty and learning about that time period. When I was in college, I read The House of Seven Gables, blew me away. And although I can't remember every detail and every this, I remember learning about life at that time. So I said, what I'm going to do is, I got this advice from my professor, was the last piece of writing I've got before I graduated was, write what you're going through right now. Whatever's on your mind right now, whatever's in your heart right now, write right now. And you'll always stay relevant. You'll never run out of ideas. Did you go to the grocery store and someone yelled at you? That's a great story. It may not seem significant. People 100 years from now will love to know what it's like going to the grocery store and all the problems that come about. You want to write a classic? You can. Believe in yourself. Believe your book is that great. When I first started writing, I said, I'm going to come in here to see if I can finish a book. I was going to college for human resource management, and I thought that's what I would be in life. And I had a friend, we were hanging out one day. He says, Nova, that's just so average. What you want to do? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, I want to run the human resource department for General Motors. I said, I can't get any bigger than that. He says, no, you're not listening to what I'm saying. He said, that's average. That's not special. He said, what's inside of you that's special, that's different, that nobody else can do? Your talent. He was a rapper. So he was really into that whole thing. And I remember we had this conversation about 5 times, and I couldn't think of my talent. Because I'm like, I don't sing well, I don't dance well, I don't do this. And then I said, well, I'm going to see if I can write a book. And I just missed the idea when it first came to me that I'm not a writer, but it wouldn't go away, that thought. So I sat down and I wrote this book and I finished it. And that was like the biggest, proudest moment of my life at the time. I was 24 and I just finished a book. It didn't make sense and it was full of messes, but it was mine. Long story short, I was hurt at General Motors. I go off to college. I flunked out the business college. I flunked out. I wanted to cry when I got that letter saying, you're on academic probation. One more bad semester, you're out of here. So it was a hot summer day and I was walking through campus thinking the hardest I've ever thought in my life about my life and myself and who I was and my direction and purpose. And I just said, it's not going to work out in the business college. I felt that. And I said, well, what else? What else do I really want to do and be? And I said, well, I did write a book. Maybe I can go do that. So I went to the counseling office, poked around in there, found out they had an English department, went and talked to them. There it goes. I graduated with honors. I tell people all the time from that story, I went from a dropout in the business college to graduating with honors in the English department. Do what comes natural, do what comes easy, and what is fun and exciting. If you struggle at writing and you've been doing it a very long time, there's a lot of different approaches. I would say I would join a writing group. Imaginative Storm is amazing. Very happy place, but there's a lot of meetups out there. There's so many groups. Google it. The biggest thing that has helped me is being around other creative writers. When I started out, I was not really good. Going through years of workshops, years of critiques and feedback and deconstruction, and taking it to heart, not getting offended. When someone says, hey, Nova, I read that, I didn't like it. I don't get mad. I said, well, what do you like? And then they tell me, well, what do you think it could have been better? Because readers know what they want. I remember when I first started writing my first book, I was halfway through Finally Unrestricted, and I was subbing down in Nashville. And I ran across this girl, we were talking, and she asked me, she said, well, what do you do outside of subbing? She says, this can't be your only job. I says, no, it's not. I write books. And she thought about it and was like, well, what kind of books do you write? I said, drama. And she was a African-American woman, a Black girl. And she says, look, I'm going to tell you how we are as readers. We want drama the whole way through. Page 1 to page whatever you end. I don't want a boring page or a boring sentence. And if you can deliver the real drama, you're going to make it. And I never forgot that she says that. And I tell drama people all the time who want to write drama, who want to write the fiction, if you don't feel emotional behind what you're writing, you did not come hard enough. All my books, I cried at a certain point. If you're writing and you're excited, people are going to get that part.
We're following this thread of creating drama and writing stories. And you mentioned your spiritual sensibilities. I'd love for you to reflect from the writer's point of view the relationship between the healthy ego and spirituality. It strikes me that a healthy ego is an essential part of allowing yourself, giving yourself the permission to drop into those deeper notions and emotions that you have in your world, in your life. So ego, spirituality, how does that play out? Could you reflect a bit on that?
You must have a firm sense of who you are. Everything, when I was in college, this was right before I was graduating, maybe 6 weeks before graduation. One of my best friends came over and she sat down. She looked at me and she said, Nova. And she goes into the story of someone we both knew who was going to school to be an ambassador to the United States. And she said that is the dumbest idea she's ever heard because this was a Black girl from average background. Who do you know that is an ambassador to anything? She says, we don't have the resources to go to school for stuff that's not going to get you paid right away. You don't have time for that. And she says, and you trying to be this best-selling author, we don't get it. Who do you know that's a best-selling author? And I looked at her and I said, well, I'm going to be a best-selling author. If I would have listened to her or had not a strong sense of myself, I would not still be here. Everyone told me I was a fool for leaving GM. Why did I do that to my life? All the hardships that came. God guided me the whole time. When I first started writing, I prayed. I prayed hard to find my talent. When my friend came to me and he said, Nova, be special, I prayed because I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. You have to have a relationship with God or you won't have a relationship with anyone. I don't have any formal journalism education. My degree is in creative writing. When I first started out, I had to teach myself journalism. And prayer is how I got through the beginning. I would sit down, I would pray and ask for guidance because I did not know what I was doing. It worked for me. I prayed through every problem I've ever had. A healthy ego is necessary. Internationally and nationally, I'm not known, but I am known locally, very well known locally. You have to have a strong sense of purpose when an unhappy person gets a hold of your writing, recognizes you in real life, and is not happy for you. You have to have a healthy ego to hold your head up. I think in 2024, I did struggle with that. I struggled with being recognized and feeling on the spot. Like, why does people looking at me? And then I realized, oh, I have a podcast or, like there is a reason why people are looking at me and you have to learn to stay focused in all of that. Just stay focused in all of that. So a healthy ego, you must have it. A spiritual relationship with God and yourself, you must have that as well.
I want you to come back now to just a little reflection, if you would, on how you make drama happen in a story. People listen to this podcast, this radio show, and they write, and you and I are on the Imaginative Storm call. I'm always curious about how one makes drama happen. And you did say you've had people push back when they recognized you or give you a negative vibe, which is a bit of drama in life, of course. My goodness. So how do you keep that drama going from page one all the way to the end? Is there a sensibility that you have? Do you have techniques that you've discovered, something you could share with people who'd like to try it themselves?
So I had a professor say this Quote from Stephen King. Have your character, get your character up in a tree, throw apples at your character, get them down off the tree. Break that down into this. You have a character, put them in a situation, whatever situation, they're going for a walk, they're doing something. Stay in the now. Do something. Then have something bad happen. Anything bad. When I wrote White Glass, I originally wrote it for that the main character had a perfect relationship with her partner. Everyone thought it was boring. Why? Because nothing bad happened. If you want to build that drama, what is drama? Problems. You have to ask yourself, how can I find problems? And that's what I do. When I write a book, I have the beginning and the end. Those are the two things I had in my mind. I'm like, I know how this starts. I know how it ends. And then I put the middle together, which is nothing but problem. And I really don't pre-plan. I sit down, I write, I just let it go. And then I just say, oh, that was good. Now how can I make that into a problem? Then I solve the problem.
You have sparked a question for me. When you are writing these problems into the character's life, something is happening and then the character solves the problem, moves on to the next beat. As you work through these problems, are you able to learn nuanced ways of making decisions that you are able to transfer over to your life? Your life skills, do they increase in value and as you work with these problems, do you know more than you did before? And then you can work that into your real life.
Oh, yes. I learned that in Bipolar Bear. I'm bipolar. Okay, I'm bipolar, I'm schizophrenic, I'm a mental health advocate. Yes. So I wrote a line in there talking about taking your medication and changing. Well, when Bipolar Bears came out, I was not on a medication and I had like a very public nervous breakdown. It was very embarrassing. And I reflected back on Bipolar Bears and what I learned from my characters. And I says, well, how can I go around being a mental health advocate for others and telling others to take their medication and to change when I haven't done it myself? That is when I reflected back on Bipolar Bears and the lessons that I said Shalana and Terry should do, I took on for myself.
That is really interesting. I'm thinking now, do you by chance have something you could read for us?
I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, White Glass. To find out more about White Glass and how you can get a hold of this book, www.novawallace.com. White Glass. I got out of the car and walked into East Point Mall. I was walking, thinking about my life, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of Foot World. There was a man there. He had a limp, and the left side of his face was sagging. I took a deep breath. It was Robert. The last time I saw him, Sharanda had just hit him in the head with a skate. I knew he recognized me because he didn't stop staring. I didn't know what to do. I felt my feet moving in his direction, but my mind wasn't thinking. The last time I saw Robert, I was with the squad. We all met at the skating rink, skate time, on a Saturday evening. I was 21 then, and so were Michaela, Sharanda, and Shardik. It was the spring of 2005. Sharanda's son was only a year old at the time. The problem was that the baby's father had a new girlfriend, and she was causing trouble. Sharanda found out about the girl when her cousin spotted Robert and the girlfriend together getting ice cream at Frosty Freeze. The girlfriend's name was Heather, and she was a freshman at CCU. Soon, we were all informed of the situation. A week after the ice cream incident, Shardik called me to come up to the skating rink to confront the girl. Robert told her he was going skating, and Sharanda knew he wouldn't be alone. The four of us met in the parking lot about an hour after the rink opened. He ain't never took me nowhere, Sharanda said as we walked in. He is everywhere with her. She was trying not to look hurt, but there were tears in her eyes, and several times her voice cracked. Shardik was nodding her head up and down. Then she whispered, "If Heather thinks we ain't gonna do nothing, she got us fucked up. She should have known not to mess with Robert because of you." I felt bad for Sharanda. I wanted justice for her. I braided my hair back in 5 tight French braids to ensure it didn't get pulled out. I threw in a pair of sweatpants, tennis shoes, and a white beater t-shirt. We were all pissed. We walked into the skating rink and paid for 2 hours worth of skating, plus a skate rental. We carried our skates in our hands as we walked to the lockers. It was Sharanda who spotted them first. Robert and Heather were skating around by the lockers, laughing and holding hands. In an instant, Sharanda ran over. "Hell no. Called your ass all last night and you didn't even answer. See why?" Sharanda said. The girlfriend was short and skinny. She had a long weave ponytail pulled back. She was cute, real cute. I could see the look of jealousy on Sharanda's face as she stared the girl up and down. "I don't got time for this," Robert said as he tried to skate away. He grabbed Heather's hand. Sharanda got in front of them. Robert, you don't think this is just gonna skate away? This ain't working." Robert turned to Sharanda. He was about the same height as her. They both stood about 5 feet 7 inches. Robert was muscular, though, but he was mild-mannered. And from what I knew about his relationship with Sharanda, he was always nice to her and never wanted to fight. "Look, girl, I take care of my son and that's it. You were never, ever my girlfriend. Ever. We were just in a low. I told you I ain't gonna do this with you." I saw the fire in Sharanda's eyes as she reached up and hit Robert in the face as hard as possible with one of the skates she held. In an instant, the fight was on. Sharanda began wailing at Robert with the skate. Michaela jumped in and began hitting him with her skate as well. Robert tried to fight back. The girlfriend turned to leave. Before she could do anything, Shardeep jumped on her. Shardeep hit her in the face several times with the skate, and the girl fell to the ground. Soon the girlfriend was bleeding from her mouth and nose where she had been hit with the skate. There was a security guard there. He ran over. He punched Shardik in the head. I hit him in the back of the head with my skate. Shardik hit him twice. I heard a gunshot across the room and people were yelling and screaming. Some charged for the door. "They're calling the police," someone yelled. Shardik grabbed me and signaled for Sharanda and Michaela. We ran out the door. I ran nonstop until I was in my car. Sharanda and Michaela had their cars. Shardik rode away with Sharanda.
All right, that was fantastic. I love the skates flying around in the scene. Well done. Well done.
It was very weird that whole thing came up, but when I was following up by polar bears, I saw this skate and I kept hearing something say, "And then I saw the skate." And then I visualized it and I said, something happened. Someone was attacked with the skate. And I just wrote it out.
So, when you develop your characters, do you work a fair amount on their backstories? Do you know a lot about them?
I stopped doing that. When I develop my characters, I jump right in from the moment it starts. I want to branch out into different forms of writing. So I want to write about slave stories because all the great Black people have a slave story that they do. In writing something like that, it would be a backstory, how I would do it. And that would be a new one at first for me.
Thinking about slave stories, and I just thought of this just now. Slavery is fully engaged right now in the world. Slavery has never been absent in the world. Somebody's always in bondage. Somebody's always taken in, forced to do something against their will for the profit of somebody else. So it would be really interesting to do a slave story and try to incorporate that long sensibility that humans have had to enslave others over the centuries. What drives one person to enslave another and why?
And I'm so happy you made that point. Slavery is a problem in human nature. Power, lust, so many different reasons. I think it's fascinating how you said to tie modern day slavery into other forms of slavery throughout history because it's something that human history has done. I said when I did a slave story, I wanted to be different somehow, so a modern time and then reflect back. I think there's just been so many amazing and great slave stories. Just amazing. How do you compete with that? It's something I said I would do over time. Oh, maybe in my 60s when I really learned more, grew more, to write this phenomenal book that I have because I have a little bit of the idea. I wrote a short story for a creative writing class, and it was a slavery story, and it went over very well with the class, and I never forgot that story. And I said, man, I would love to do that. I would love to do horror. That is like a big thing I want to do in my life is to write a scary, scary, scary story that scares everybody.
I don't know if I could do that or not. I'm afraid of those scary stories for sure. And yet it's an intriguing bit of a challenge. And also thinking about the scary stories, the slave stories, you give them a problem, put them in a tree and throw apples at them, right? The idea of exploring what would make someone go in the direction of enslavement really brings the question of evil up. And does it exist? And what is it? I mean, my automatically will go to, oh, it's evil. The way people treat others from an enslavement point of view is evil, and yet the person enslaving the person might not think they're evil. Now, you might have to be 100 years old to handle the thinking around that. I don't know if you could ever get to that, but that's the question that's driving that. Does it exist, and what makes it happen, and how do I determine what it is and what it isn't, and it can just go on and on forever. But that's the question that's underneath that, I think.
Is the pursuit of money evil? That is Master Jack. That is the title and everything. I grappled with that of why would he get into the business of slavery? His mindset is not evil. It is for the betterment of his family, for his economy. African American studies was my minor in college. And so we talked a lot about this, and I read a quote from a slave master who talked about slavery is the economy. It's about money. And even modern day slavery, a lot of it is about money. You make a lot of money from slaves, of all kinds, sex slaves, all kinds of slaves. And people do that nowadays. Some aren't evil. I mean, with knowing what we know about how to treat people, if you still treat people that way, you know, hundreds of years ago, education and what people knew was a little bit different than what it is today. For someone in 2025 to enslave another person, why? That is my whole question and it's not legal. You could have looked at the transatlantic slave trade and says, well, it was legal. So if this is legal and this is an economy, what's wrong with it? Okay, that's an argument. But today, there's no excuse to do that to another person. It's just, in my opinion, no excuse.
I did end up at Ile de Grey in Dakar, looking out on the sea where the slave traders shipped the people out off to America and to Europe. So I had some experience of what it would have been like to step on the boat from the point of view of the person who was captured and shoved out onto the boat to never come back. And that was that was haunting for me, still is to this day. I was in 1994 when I was there. It was a long, long time ago, 30 years, and yet I can still hear the sea lapping against the rocks beneath the door that was open to the harbor that went out into the Atlantic.
Oh, I could just imagine seeing that and being there in real life, the spirits.
I didn't see any spirits, but honestly, I
Hello.
surely felt like there were some spirits floating around there. Bound to be. They're bound to be. Just as we have a little bit more time, I know that you work with people helping to promote them in their work or in their, promote people. You're in public relations. And I'd like for you just to end on some notes around how we can promote ourselves and how we can build ourselves out, because you do a terrific job of promoting people and you do it at a fairly high level. And you work with some really significant people around the country, helping them find their way out into the world in bigger and bigger ways. So can you reflect a little bit on that as we close out, just to give folks a sense of what they might be able to do with their own expression of self in the public arena?
So for indie authors out there who are saying, I do not have a big PR budget and I cannot do all these things, what can I do to get myself out there? I would say utilize the power of the internet and social media. So post, post, and post, but don't do just like a regular post. Study the websites of successful authors and businesses. You want to get into creating videos. I'm going to tell you, any indie author, if you do not have an Adobe Express account, you're missing out. It's $10 a month. You can edit videos, photos, and do all sorts of things. You need to advance your social media skills. A great way to get out there is to get on podcasts. So if you can't get on a big podcast, get on a little one. What I did, got on Facebook and started to join podcasts, people who had podcasts, and then I would message them and say, hey, can I get on your podcast? That is a big way to get your name out there. Social media posts, get on people's podcasts. What I like to do is I do direct. So I'm a vendor. So Google book vendors, any city you're interested in, any state, find out where they're having those book shows and get in them.
It takes a great deal of effort. Some people might be thinking, well, why me? Do you have anything to say to the person thinking, why me? Or I don't have enough time to develop all that skill, or it just seems so overwhelming to me?
Do one little thing. Do one little thing. Find out what you want to do. My thing was I wanted a professional looking social media page. I was tired of my page looking ghetto. And I couldn't figure out why my page didn't look as cute as everybody else's. So I learned how to do videos and animate photos. And I learned from Google. Yes, I'm in PR, so of course I get the inside scoop on how to do things. But I just told people what to do. Adobe Express. Google what you want to learn. Um, Everybody follows people's social media first. Website. That's what I wanted to tell people. If you are an author, you must have a website. If you put in no effort, you're not going to get far. I'm going to tell you the average indie author sells 50 copies and they sell them to their friends and family. The average traditional published author sells 500 copies. So even if you're traditionally published and you got the bells and the whistles, you're probably not going to do a whole lot. But if you self-promote, if you get into those vendor shows, you get your website, you constantly post in your city. This has been my approach. Blow up one city at a time. So I started around my town, doing things around my town, getting my name out around my town. Then I went to Detroit, and then I started to work in the Detroit, a bigger market, a bigger city, Go one city at a time. Network, get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a big one. And poke around. Start meeting other authors. Find best-selling authors and make friends with them and ask them how they did it, who they know. My biggest goal right now is traditional contract. I have reasons why I want a traditional publishing deal. So that's the next step for me. And I'm very confident I can do it if I try, but you have to be confident. You have to have that ego. You have to have that sense of you can do it. Never feel intimidated. Never feel like you're not good enough. You've already lost. You up here is the whole battle. So if you come into it and you say so overwhelming, I just say that's because you try to do too much at once. Do one little thing and then do it very well. When I first started with Finally Unrestricted, my goal was to do a book signing. I said, Ma, I got a book. I'm doing me a book signing. So I got some business insurance. I invested. You're going to spend money. I bought some business insurance. And then I started calling the mall. I called the Lansing Mall because I'm in Lansing up the street. And I talked to them and I paid $100 for 3 weekends. There you go. And that's how I started Nova Wallace. But you just do one little thing and take it from there. And when you have a success, keep doing that. Do what is successful for you. I also had a great marketer tell me, know your market and know why people buy you.
That's a fantastic piece of advice. Fantastic. So we've arrived at the time when we must say goodbye. So the main thing I'm taking away from this conversation is know yourself, trust yourself, lean into self, let your confidence grow slowly, do one thing at a time and blow up one big city at a time or one little town at a time and go to the next one after that.
Build a following.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Nova Wallace, for being on this show. I love Nova Wallace. That's a great pen name. Deborah Williams is good as well. I first knew you as that, but I'm going to now know you as Nova Wallace, if you don't mind.
I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Well, Nova Wallace, thank you so much for being on Twice 5 Miles Radio.
All right. Thank you, Navé, for having me. Everyone, thank you for listening, and you guys have a great day.
And there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with Nova Wallace. When Nova and I started to talk about the broader implications of what drives people to enslave other people, I was reminded of a poem by William Butler Yeats titled The Second Coming. You probably are familiar with some of the lines because they're relatively well known, and I thought this would be a great time to offer it up and then give you a bit of reflection on how I view what Yeats is saying in The Second Coming and tie it back to what Nova and I were talking about. So here's The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in a widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. And that was William Butler Yeats' poem, The Second Coming. In the first part of that poem, Yeats says, "The best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Is it really true that the best lack all convictions and the worst are full of passionate intensity? Probably not 100% true. Sometimes the best in us has complete conviction for what we're doing, or many convictions around what drives us to excellence. The worst, I have come across some of those characters, and often they do seem to be full of passionate intensity. They want you to know where they're coming from. Some will even go to their grave or die fighting for a belief that I find completely impossible to believe. For example, I do not believe the earth is flat. And yet there are thousands of people out there who will argue day in and day out the earth is flat, and they will tell me I have it wrong. Over the years, I've traveled enough globally to know that the earth is round because I've circled the globe in an airplane. If the earth were flat, where would the plane go once you got to the edge? Would it fly underneath the flatness? And what would be underneath the flatness? The best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. There's another poem I'm reminded of that illustrates this idea of people having full conviction about almost nothing. And I'd like to read that poem for you now. It pairs with The Second Coming. It was written by Kenneth Fearing. It's titled The End of a Seers Convention. Each one has an opinion, and the opinions are very, very strong, and yet nobody really does have an opinion, nor do they ever arrive at anything. This is a good example of the best lack all convictions, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. It's all about an illusion. So here is Kenneth Fearing's End of a Seers Convention. We were walking and talking on the roof of the world in an age that seemed, at that time, an extremely modern age. Considering a merger last on the agenda of the 7 great leagues that held the 7 true keys to the 7 ultimate spheres of all moral, financial, and occult life. "I foresee a day," said one of the delegates, an astroanalyst from Idaho, "when men will fly through the air and talk across space. They will sail in ships that float beneath the water. They will emanate shadows of themselves upon a screen, and the shadows will move and talk and seem as though real." "Very interesting indeed," declared a gypsy delegate, "but I should like to ask, as a simple reader of tea leaves and palms, how does this combat the widespread and growing evil of the police?" The astrologer shrugged, and an accidental meteor fell from his robes and smoldered on the floor. "In addition," he said, "I foresee a war and a victory after that one, and after the victory, a war again." "Trite," was the comment of a crystal gazer from Miami Beach. "Any damn fool any damn time can visualize wars and more wars and famines and plagues. The real question is how to seize power from entrenched and organized men of common sense." "I foresee a day," said the Idaho astrologer, "when human beings will live on top of flagpoles and dance at some profit for weeks and months without any rest, and some will die very happily of eating watermelons and nails and cherry pies." "Why," said a bored numerologist, reaching for his hat, can't these stargazers keep their feet on the ground?" "Even if it's true," said a Bombay illusionist, "it's not like the rope trick. Altogether practical." "And furthermore, and finally," said the astrologer with comets and half-moons dropping from his pockets and his agitated sleeves, "I prophesy an age of triumph for laziness and sleep and dreams and utter peace. I can see couples walking through public parks in love, and those who do not are wanted by the sheriff. I see men fishing beside quiet streams, and those who do not are pursued by collectors and plastered with liens. This does not tell us how to fight against skepticism," muttered a puzzled mesmerist groping for the door. "I think," agreed a lady who interpreted the cards, "we are all inclined to accept too much on faith." A sprinkling of rain or dragon's blood or a handful of cinders fell on the small black umbrellas they raised against the sky. And that was Kenneth Fearing's End of a Seers Convention. How many times have you been in a group of people like the wizards at this convention, and everybody's talking, and have you ever wondered what they were saying? I have found myself often in conversations not exactly sure what somebody's talking about. I'm following along, and they have full conviction, and yet sometimes it doesn't quite make sense. I think that's okay. That's part of the imaginative process. I'm willing to suspend disbelief and try on something new. That said, I'm also willing to allow my own personal discernment to filter through things and maybe come up with something, come up with some conclusions, or at least come up with a decent question or two that I know will require me to make more and more inquiries, maybe never fully answer the question, and yet pursue it, track it, keep at it, see what it reveals, stay with it for a while. And that's one of the reasons why I like the idea of letting poetry inform the way I operate in the world. And I hope you have some opportunities to allow poetry to do the same for you, to allow writing to do the same for you. I have turned to the poetic lines, I can't tell you how many times during my life. Sometimes I do it when I'm standing in the grocery store line and I just recite something. For example, I'm working on Wallace Stevens' poem, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. I'm working on it in the sense that I'm re-memorizing it. I memorized it a long time ago. 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. There are 13 almost haiku-type offerings that Wallace Stevens gives us about the blackbird. And I think it's interesting because in Yeats's poem, the birds are whirling around the statue that's crawling toward Bethlehem. Desert birds whirling around. And I love the idea of all of us whirling around as blackbirds. If you're not whirling around as a blackbird, what kind of bird are you? That would be an interesting choice. If you are an eagle, you have a wide wingspan. If you're a hummingbird, you have a short wingspan and you move fast. What kind of bird are you? On that note, here's the first part of Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. I was of 3 minds, like a tree, in which there are 3 blackbirds. The blackbird whirled in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. A man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. I do not know which to prefer, the beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos, the blackbird whistling, or just after. That was a little bit of 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. Do you really know what to prefer? Maybe you can just drop into it, watch the blackbirds fly around, and enjoy the view. However it plays for you, we've arrived at the time we must say goodbye. So on that note, thank you so much for listening to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé. always airing first on WPVMLP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville, heard all over the world and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville. Robin Collier for doing the same, managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio in Taos. If you would like to reach me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. Navé is spelled Nave. And I would like to remind you, we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you would like to improve your writing skills, your writing chops, Imaginative Storm is a great place to go. If you're looking for a free workshop, a free community of writers, Imaginative Storm offers that on Saturday at noon Eastern Time and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a Zoom call. ImaginativeStorm.com. If you go there, you will find out how to connect with us. So like I said, thank you ever so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you come back very soon. And until then, hey, maybe I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.